But I also revisited the original film, the 1990 film. You've probably never seen that, right?
I've seen bits and parts of it. There were like three of them, right? With those like big hulky like turtle costumes or whatever.
Yeah, there were three. They each got successively worse.
Yeah, I know the third one was really, really bad.
Yeah, the third one's like unspeakable. The original Turtles film, it actually started the careers of a lot of like now stars. So like you got Sam Rockwell in one of his first roles. You know, you got Elias Koteas, and then you got Eminem in his first role. The original though is like it's like notoriously pretty dark, and that's the main contrast with the new film. Is the new film felt like softer, and there felt like it felt like there was no stakes throughout the entire film between the characters and the turtles, and even with the villain. The villain felt very like there was never any threat from him, whereas in the original film you really got a sense from the shredder and everything that there was a
Yeah,
real threat.
there's something frustrating about seeing a movie with characters that you liked as a kid and still like, and just seeing the writers and the director and everyone involved just doing nothing with those characters. Like
Yeah.
to me, when I was watching they just seemed like they were robots there to just like spout out references to things, just like
Right.
references to memes and things. And like, I sound so pretentious trashing this movie because it's for kids, but at the same time, even kids I feel deserve like a story, like with characters that they can relate to like actually invest them in the story.
A lot of the humor relied on just like sheer references. Like there was no depth. There was no punchline.
Yeah,
The original was no comic masterpiece, but I think one of the screenwriters was a former comedian and made jokes, put jokes in it.
it's just one of those movies that everyone enjoys, and I can't fathom why they do. None of the jokes were funny. The
Mhm.
story was terrible. None of the characters were developed. Like they weren't differentiated in any way.
Right.
They all have the same exact personality.
If you were like blindfolded, even their voices were similar, but you wouldn't be able to tell like, where one character ended and the other one began.
I think some of the voice actors that they chose were kids, right? They were like teenagers.
They're supposed to be teenagers, but they look and they sound like prepubescent children.
There was never any emotion in any of the voice acting. It just
No.
seemed very, very flat to me.
In the original film, there was real like drama. So there's a character Raphael in the original film. He's basically like a bipolar manic depressive. He's always in a bad mood, but he gave like an edge to the dynamics between the turtles, and like he's always constantly the source of
Yeah.
arguing between them. And that is something you really lack in the new film. There's a part where like he's just asking Raphael, where are you going? And he goes, out to a movie. Is that okay with you? You don't get any of that in the new film. Everybody's just way too relaxed.
Like adding on to that, I don't even remember Raphael being in the movie, unless
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Like I don't remember him doing anything. Like,
He showed up, but he wasn't in it. The beginning kind of like sees you in a way that the rest of the movie didn't. There's a real sense of like alienation and wanting to be like a normal kid in high school, and also the way the music was by Trent Reznor was very good. He did like the Social Network.
artistically and design wise, it was really, really cool. If I wanted to see that, I would go to like a planetarium to have a cool experience where I'm looking at things. I go to a movie to see a story and characters.
A lot of the dialogue was actually written by the kids themselves doing the voice acting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it really occurred to me before I even knew that fact. It occurred to me how like 12-year-old and juvenile and ADD the dialogue was with the hodgepodge of like references, and they kind of incessantly just beat you over the head with this is supposed to be funny, but really
Yeah.
the 12-year-olds wrote it, so it's not like
Yeah, and like, if the thing is, if the audience is 12-year-olds and that's what they're marketing towards, like that's fine. Like if that is what that age group finds funny, I
right.
don't see a problem with that. But I think there just have to be some kids out there who were 12, 11, and sat through this and were just like, I'm bored. The story sucks. Like, this isn't going anywhere. Maybe the kid I'm talking about is the kid that everyone else is picking on, for all I
Yeah,
know, like for wanting to see a good Ninja Turtle story.
yeah. And a lot of the tension or potential tension was deflated by the kind of juvenile ADD humor. Whereas in the movie, there were in the original movie, there was real moments where like, it was dark and it was dreary and there were stakes.
If you look at other movies that have come out recently that have taken like childhood media and recycled it, like Super Mario Brothers movie, Sonic the Hedgehog, I
Yeah.
mean, I wouldn't say those were great movies, but at least they told a coherent story where the characters wanted something and you could follow that journey throughout it. Obviously, the Turtles had this goal where, like, they want to be accepted, they want to go to high school, but I felt like there wasn't really enough intention of them acting on that goal. You know, like
Yeah.
with all the stuff going on and just like jumping from weird set piece to weird set piece, like,
Yeah.
and because of all the stupid jokes, I lost track of what they were trying to do. You know, I
Yeah.
lost track of like what they wanted. You can have like complex themes in kids movies like Ratatouille, Up. There are deep themes in those movies. You know, kids are able to handle that. Nowadays everything is so sugar coated. They don't want to scare anyone. They don't want to make anyone step outside of their comfort zone. But if you look back at like 90s and 80s like Don Bluth movies that were
Right.
released, they were really really dark, like The Land Before Time, and there
Right.
was a legitimate sense of like danger in them.
And
But
death. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like, you know, that's a good point. These movies like confronted death. And I
Right.
think the original Turtles dealt with that a little.
It really did. In the original Turtle, Splinter gets basically like kidnapped, taken hostage, and he's like almost like a Christ figure. He's like pinned
Yeah,
up
I
in
see.
this like turtles are constantly facing death. In the new one, their biggest threat is they might be milked, you know.
I have kind of a theory that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started as a joke. You know, it was never meant to be taken seriously. It started as a parody of comic books. Like it was an absurd idea and they were mocking like superheroes in general.
Yeah.
So the question becomes really with all these different versions of the Ninja Turtles over the generations, like what is the tone of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Is it absurd? Is it funny? Is it dark? Nobody knows. So we get something like this.
This is like the confused bastard child of that
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a confused bastard child of not knowing like what the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are.
and I think some of the movies really kind of you kind of see where they get lost.
I felt like they didn't lean into the humanity of the characters enough. Because
No.
you know, they're brothers. Like there's so much room for like drama and relate and you know, just
Right.
a conflict of any kind, but like something you said, like there was no interpersonal conflict in the movie at all. Like they got along the entire time. They didn't really fight. If they had any argument, it was like quickly resolved.
Yeah.
So like I just saw them as the same character and I didn't see any reason to care about them.
That's the one thing you don't want to do with writing drama. You know, you want the characters to have some form of conflict, but in this movie,
Yeah.
they're constantly in agreement or joking. There's no break from that flow, even when they're encountering supposedly threatening scenarios, like when Superfly. And you really got to like take into account like what an ineffectual villain Superfly is. The reason why the filmmakers chose that villain instead of Shredder was because they like the idea that Superfly, you know, was also one of the ooze infected mutants and could potentially influence them. But there's never any sense that he's ever going to do anything really dangerous with. You don't see anything. He talks a big talk, but you don't see him actually cause any kind
Yeah.
of real damage.
But there
Right.
really wasn't even a power struggle between the turtles of like, oh wow, maybe we should side with these guys. There could have been room for conflict right there. You could have
Yeah.
had like Raphael or someone want to break away from the group and
Yeah.
actually be part of this like other mutant community.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would have been interesting and caused conflict between the turtles.
This movie kind of dances around that throughout.
I actually liked the Superfly villain. Like I'll disagree with you there.
Oh,
I
nice.
didn't like I thought at the very least they had a foundation for a cool villain. They had an interesting setup and a cool backstory, and his motivation made sense.
Right.
He looked cool. I liked his role in the movie. I liked him more than I actually liked spending time with the turtles.
Yeah.
I think at the end I was actually just rooting for him to kill them all, but
Oh,
that's
me
besides
too.
the
When he's actually like growing into this giant monster and he's taking over the city, it sounds like he's relaxed. It sounds like he's not actually into what he's saying.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like even the voice acting for him was very one note. There was never any sense of like urgency or like a real threat from him at all. Yeah.
It's undercutting its own purpose. The whole milking joke, at first, I thought it was really obnoxious when I first saw the movie. It actually is pretty funny. You know, Splinter comes in, he's like, "Don't tell me, are you guys actually, you guys are being milked?" They're like, "No, it's not what it looks like." And then the bottom of the machine in like gilded letters, it says milking machine. It's just ridiculous.
Oh, it almost felt like there should have been a laugh track because I felt like I was being told when I was supposed to laugh. You know,
Right.
it was so manufactured.
They'd pick a joke like the April vomiting or the milking, and they decide this is going to be the funny thing, and they're definitely going to laugh. But then they'd repeat it again and again. And like the whole thing when April was like vomiting, and you hear like that dumb song, you know, "Feel the rain on your skin." It's like
Yeah.
that to me was really cringy because that consisted of a double failed joke. One was just the reference to that song, and then the other was the joke that they beat over your head, which I guess maybe to a 5-year-old would have been funny, but I didn't really see my nephew laugh.
It didn't know what it was supposed to be. Like, if it
Hmm.
was supposed to be a movie for 5-year-olds, it didn't do a good job of being a movie for 5-year-olds. But if it was
There you go.
trying to be a movie for anyone else, like other than like the 11 to 12 age group, I just don't see the appeal in it.
I mean, maybe our mutual dislike of this film is probably a reflection of the quality of their writing for that age group, what they aim for.
Yeah. Going back to the tonal inconsistencies, it's true that no one ever really established a tone for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If you think about every single Ninja Turtles movie, the tone in every single one is different.
Huh.
And that tells me that they're like, okay, we tried this last time. But then again, all the games are different, all the movies are different, the comics are different, the TV shows are different. We can basically do whatever we want with this. They really could have put the turtles into any situation and had them do anything,
Right.
whether it was intended for kids or not. And people still, I don't think anyone would have had a problem with it because, like, we've never really gotten the idea of what the tone of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is. One thing I think worked well was the relationship between Splinter and the turtles, like the whole backstory with finding them when they were babies.
Yeah.
That was, that was, I wouldn't say it was touching because, it's a ridiculous movie about turtles falling into mutant waste,
Yeah.
but it was, that was like the one semblance of humanity that I saw in the movie, like that relationship between like the father and the kids
Right.
and their growing.
You were wondering why so many people at one point it had a higher rating than like Oppenheimer. I think it kind of proves how willing audiences are to ignore really subpar writing if the casting's diverse and the animation's kind of like slick and
Yeah, and like the characters are recognizable media. It's like been passed down to generations.
what would you say about the direction of the visuals of that animation and then also some of the like the action scenes themselves?
Well, I thought that was fantastic,
Me
actually.
too.
I thought the animation was really, really cool. I thought the fight scenes were really, really well done. And what I noticed too is that any movie that comes out with that art style now, like I know a few of those Spider-Man movies had that art style.
Yeah.
All those movies tend to do very well at the box office.
Wow.
And part of me questions whether that's a reflection of the quality of the writing
Yeah.
or people being intrigued by this like new animation.
It's like dazzling them almost.
Yeah, because like visually it was stunning. It was a really
Mhm.
cool visual movie.
Yeah, and it made me wonder like what would have happened if the original 1990 film was presented in this kind of animation instead of live action and vice versa.
Yeah, because I almost feel like nowadays you really couldn't get away with what they did with the first one. They were a franchise back then, and obviously they were super, super popular, but
Uh-huh.
it's kind of transcended that now. It's become this like international commercialized mass market thing. So I feel like if that script for the original were written today, Hollywood would probably try to find ways to make it more marketable. So you had those inside jokes, so you had those memes. So they're guaranteed that, at least in their minds, that
Right.
like 12-year-old or 11-year-old kids are going to like it.
And really those specific jokes slash references to pop culture and TikTok and whatnot, they felt very, very calculated. Like we check off A, B, and C box, well, at least get some portion of the young audience, captivated, like as if they're like monkeys or something.
It should have been written by a comic book writer. I think they would have
Mm,
done a better job with it than someone who's a Hollywood comedy writer. Marvel, they get actual comic book writers a lot of the time to write the scripts and flesh them
yeah.
out. So I don't understand why they didn't do that for the Turtles. I know Seth Rogen was like, I think he was the kind of the pioneer of this, but I feel like the movie would benefit a lot more from a comic book writer because they understand the source material more and they understand
Right.
the character too.